No matter what happens, you're never going to be accepted by everybody, loved by everybody. So when you know that, it's like, F them. I'm just going to focus on being the best person I can be.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Brand Power Analysis. Today we have on Aida. Aida, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you, who you are, and what you do?
Sure. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Zach. So I'm a media consultant. My background for many years was I had a television production company. I launched 5 television shows that I created. I hosted 2 of them, and we sold them to over 60 countries around the world. So my background is in production and TV. Interestingly enough, Zach, since you're in the fitness and athletic space, one of them was a show called The Art of Building Bodies. It was about building athletic strength, more about like muscle building. I had an ex-football player host that one and a bodybuilding female athlete. And then the other one, when we shot that show, everybody kept saying it's all about the food. It's all about the food. You know, we went to natural bodybuilding competitions, all sorts of athletic things. And so then we ended up launching a cooking show after that about how to cook. And that was, again, an executive chef that was a bodybuilder. And then the Canadian kickboxing team, the nutritionist for that team. So just so you know, I have a little bit of a flavor in your space.
That's wonderful. I always feel like, business owners have a sense of control in their lives when they work on themselves a little bit more and they work on their food and they work on their, I'm not going to say physical appearance, but just physical health more so.
Yeah.
Thing I think is a large contribution to people being able to be like, oh, I have the grit and the perseverance to do anything if I have, because you know how business is. There's a lot of uncontrollables.
Absolutely. And a healthy mind and body is really important. And so now what I do is I do media consulting, and that can be anywhere from PR to creating packages, media packages specifically for people that want to, like that their vision is eventually that they want to hit the big media. So they could be, maybe they launch, the book on Amazon, or they want to build a brand around a specific area or niche like on air. Or it doesn't have to be that. It could be just that they have a message in the world and they want that positive message to go out. And it's part of, hitting the big media as part of their strategy. And I actually recommend that for everybody, because even if you're starting really small, you can build that over time. Like you do personal branding with your athletes and people in the fitness area and with gyms and things like that. So even while they're putting together all their social media aspects, for social proof, you can still start small with your media brands.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think there's this thing that with online now these days, there's so much capabilities and so many things that people can do when it comes to growing. I think the faulty thing that people come to get into is they tend to have marketing fatigue, because they think that there's just so much out there to do that they just want to try everything. And I always tell, a lot of our prospects and about a lot of our clients that come in is, just start small. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at yourself. What kind of things do you value? And try to push your marketing based off of your internal values and the way you want to communicate with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody that's starting off, I recommend, I know everybody's out there doing their social media posts, and yes, that is important. It's part of your social proof. But along the way, create a media folder. So literally, you can do something like have a Google Drive folder on there. It's called your media folder. And over time, you collect that. That's what I did. So every time, like when I launched one of my shows, we would send out press releases, and we would get, for these particular ones I mentioned, magazine articles talking about the show, photos of the host. And every time I got a piece of that, I used that for the next one. So it's media begets media. So you want to keep links to anything that you've been featured in, even if it's something small, like, maybe you won a local award at your Chamber of Commerce or anything like that. That's part of your social proof for journalists. And you have that folder, of course, like with your branding, you have your professional photos in there that are, as you know, Zach, so important to have those. And then so you start putting your content ideas together. So why would a journalist be interested in your story? Like you said, Zach, you have something that's very personal, that's part of the personal brand you're creating for these athletes and clients of yours. But then it's like, okay, now what? What is the story content that a journalist or a TV producer or a radio producer is going to be interested in? So that's the difference between personal branding and media branding. It's the next level of, okay, what's my expertise? What's a story that I can speak about? What's an area that's of interest or that's maybe even controversial? And then you would put together what's called your content areas. So area of expertise that you can speak about. So for example, with one of my clients I'm currently working with, she's a finance guru, but she specializes in behavioral finance, so money mindset. So one of her content area is she's a licensed advisor, so she knows everything about, investments and wealth building, but she has a niche in behavioral finance. She can talk about what are the money stories that you were told as a child? Could that be stopping you, putting a ceiling on what you're going after in your business in terms of the amount of money you think is possible for you to make? What belief systems are impacting your actions today because you don't see the possibility that could exist, right? So that's her secondary niche. She's also a single mom. She's also a CEO of a small business. She's also a Latina. So each of these areas are content areas that she can speak about, that I could spin for her as her consultant as to what might be possible for her to have a topic. So even though she's a wealth advisor, if I get her, let's say, on a podcast or a TV show where she's speaking about being an entrepreneur and a single mom, that in itself is a content niche area. So for all your clients and your athletes, Zach, they want to think about what are the niche areas I can speak about and put that together on their media kit or EPK or press kit. That's another word for it. And if you like, we can talk about what that is as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it brings up a topic that I know that we kind of wanted to go over when it comes to building a personal brand. And for you, it would be moving into a media brand, right? Because I see a lot of college athletes these days, especially with NIL, and it can be even small brick and mortars that are starting small that get to the point where they don't understand that their stories and all the stuff that they do either outside the game or outside the business somehow correlates to why they are where they are. And it's their personality that is going to grow the business to what it wants to get to. Going back to you, I thought it was really intriguing because you talk a lot about one of the things you stated there is limiting beliefs. And I think that going from a personal brand to a media brand, there has to be some facets in there from a personal level and things that they learned from their past. And so what kind of things do you see or do you deal with when you're talking to your prospects or clients that you can help give our audience and some insights on some of the things that they could take into action to kind of help take that step into going into a media brand direction?
Yeah, you want to create your media brand based on what your long-term goals are. So if you're an athlete that wants to be on air, like that's your eventual long-term goal, then you want to nurture that media brand in that space. So the elements that you have in your media kit or your press kit have to include that. So let's say, for example, you don't have a lot of on-air experience, but that's your trajectory for 5 years from now. Well, then you got to start building some assets, right? So even if that means appearing on, just to start off with, a small Zoom podcast like this, get those video assets under your belt. Maybe you come and you do, a lunch and learn for if there's an athletic association and somebody gets a little bit of a video of you on stage. If you're going to be an on-air personality, the journalists, the TV producers, they're going to want to see what you're like on air. So you need to build and nurture that particular skill level. And it's okay if you're just starting off. You can just do a bunch of, volunteer freebies, but you got to be creative. Okay, so what is my story? And just like you mentioned, Zach, what are the unique elements? People are very interested in behind the scenes. Your story, creating that compelling background is what is a hook for both journalists and media. So you want to think about what happened in my background, what lessons did I learn, what trials and tribulations did I go through that can now be a lesson for someone else? Or how can I package that in a story that people would be interested in? So I agree with you that you got to elevate that personal brand to, well, what would that look like in the media? And just so you know, journalists, think about it from the journalist point of view. If you're a journalist looking for a quote, or if you're a radio personality and you're doing an athletic, 1 hour show every Saturday afternoon, you want to bring in a couple of college athletes or something along that line, or you're a TV producer, like for example, on the fitness show I mentioned, I remember when I was doing the auditions, one of the people that auditioned to be a host, I knew right away, I'm like, this guy is good. And now he's like, here in Toronto, he's one of like the top morning athletic guys that goes on all the morning shows and things like that. So you want to build that skill and you want to think about where do you want to go? And I think that's really critical to your messaging.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as I've gone through business, and I'd love to, we'll go back in a second to hear, I want to hear a little bit about your journey and how you came to be where you are now, from you saying developing your own TV show, which I think is phenomenal, is the mindset of, and I think this is crazy how the mindset works, but it's the whole concept, getting off tangent here, kind of reminds me of, the simulation theory, but putting out the energy and the spectrum of where you want to go. And that's part of the initial stages of building a vision, right? So being able to go out there and say, in a way that is kind of a strategy, setting your 10-year goal, setting a 5-year goal. We do that a lot with our athletes when it comes to the grit scale and trying to help them find their two passions and putting them together. But for your case, just so someone can kind of hear out a direction and a journey, I'd love to hear what kind of got you yourself into going from, hey, I'm working on TV shows and building TV shows, to now being a media consultant.
Yeah, well, it came from actually people that reached out to me and said, hey, I want to do this. Can you help me? That's really how it started with private clients. And now I'm at the place where I actually want to build a larger community, because what I find is that PR agents are very expensive. Like if you Google them, $4,000 to $8,000 a month for a PR agency. And there's, in the health and wellness industry, there's a lot of people that aren't familiar with that process. So just for me personally, I'm now in the midst of launching a whole community around how to do that. And it's just starting. But for the private clients, how I got to that point is people just started asking me about it. How did you launch your first TV show? What did you do? And what I can tell you what I did is I made a decision. It was like, okay, I had just finished media. I'd finished my 4-year degree in film and television. I had my internship was at a big network. And afterwards, I'm like, I was always interested in the personal development space. Just to go back a step, Zach. I love personal development. It was like my thing. And I thought, well, if I wanted to speak about this, how could I make my life matter the most? And I thought, if I connect it to media, then the message I want to share can be larger. Rather than speaking, to a few hundred people or a few thousand people, I could speak to millions of people. So out of the 5 shows that I created, the Positive Living Show was really my baby. But how it all started was with a decision, like, I'm going to launch a TV show. What do I have to do? Nobody knows me. I don't know exactly what I'm doing here. I don't have all these connections. So the first thing I did is I brought sponsors on board. I know that money talks, and if I bring sponsors on board, that will help me launch. So if it means that if I bring in those sponsors to the network, that will help them say yes, as opposed to if I have nothing else to offer them other than, hi, it's just me, right? And just so you know, I did the calculations once on one of the networks we looked at. They receive about 250 television pitches a year based on the data that I had calculated this one particular year. And they picked just a handful, because in television, you have distribution and you have licensing. So distribution would be where after I created my shows, we then distributed them around the world. So we went to Cannes Film Festival, and there's buyer's market for media. So all of this came together because I decided I'm going to figure out what I need to do. And if it means I need to make 100 phone calls, 100 emails, etc., then I'm going to keep going until somebody says yes. So when you're talking about belief, Zach, I had an unwavering belief that I was going to keep doing it until I figured it out and somebody said yes. And so I sat down one day and I calculated, how many people did I actually call, contact, email? And it was about 200 people before we got the first 3 sponsors for the first years to hit like 6 figures of sponsorship. And it was the belief, I'm going to figure it out until I get it done. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think
it does. Yeah.
For any of the athletes, be really clear what you want. Don't let obstacles stop you. And just know it's not going to be easy. Like, people would probably give up on the 30th call or whatever. So all those no's to get 3 to start off with. But if I didn't do that, I would have never started the first show. And then the next show was easier as you go along.
Yeah, the simple grit. I'd love to hear your take on, because I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you got to a point where you evolved as a person. And even though you had people coming in and you started, because you talked a lot about developing personal development. I kind of went through a similar journey myself, where I'm doing a very similar concept with the branding stuff that we do, right? And how did you allow yourself to take that pivot? without being like, well, this is working. It may not be working 100%, but because I see that there's a spot where you kind of, everyone goes through this, and it's kind of what I call it's a personal rebrand, so to say, where you've evolved to a certain point where you're kind of ready to take it to that next level. So what helped you get there and make that decision, and what pain points in yourself did you see that weren't allowing you to take that pivot?
Do you mean initially when I first started the first TV show, or do you mean like now in my life as I'm
now in your life, as you kind of now becoming a marketing consultant?
Yeah. So I had to decide what was next. And this is like a journey that I'm still in the midst of. So right now, I think it came from people asking me to work on their brands or sizzle reels and things like that. And then I'm like, okay, well, what exactly do I want to do next? I wrote down, what am I interested in? What do I watch on YouTube? What do I listen to podcasts? What are the areas that I'm truly interested in? What is my background and what am I really good at? Okay, so for social proof, what am I good at? And then how can I tie these various elements together? So for me, I'm interested in a lot of different things. I'm interested in personal development. I'm interested in neuroscience. I'm interested in sales and marketing. I love that aspect of it. I'm interested in wellness. I did a TEDx talk on belief systems. We were talking about that. So I'm like, how do I put all that together? And I love media. And so I decided, well, I want to be able to talk about the personal development stuff because that's what started before the media. And when I launched the Positive Living Show, one of the reasons was so I could interview all the big gurus like Bob Proctor in the space, Marianne Williamson, Joe Vitale, Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul. I wanted to meet all of them. So right now I'm like, okay, well, if I stay in media and I help other people, so if I can help, let's say 1,000 people who are in the wellness industry that don't know how to package themselves, that don't know how to get in front of big media. Wow, that would be really exciting for me because it wouldn't just be about me. I can now help all these other people. And then on top of that, in my content marketing strategy, I could still talk about the stuff that I love, about mindset and belief systems and breaking through barriers and all the stuff that's close to my heart. And right now, I'm actually in the validation point. So I have an idea, I have a concept, and now I'm bringing on my interns into my space and we're validating the idea and we're going into the marketplace and saying, what are the pain points and the problems that these health and wellness people, experts are dealing with right now? You know, what do they know about media? Do they know how to create a press release? Do they have assets they're putting together? And if they don't, then we have to create something to serve that market. So literally, you're speaking to me in the moment of literally creating the next phase of my life.
I love seeing you in that space because I think that a lot of people, it holds them back, not allowing themselves. And a couple things that you said there that I think really correlate is one, you have interns. And so you realize that, hey, this isn't going to just be all me, but I'm going to have a team around me. And that's, and not to go off of your assets, which we can kind of showcase in a minute to kind of showcase people things, but it also showcases your ability to take your own personal values, the things that you want to express, and find people to come work for you that follow those same values, that you want to have that same mission. So now your mission is different than it originally was. It's not just helping those people outside in the world, but it's to help these interns learn and grow in the industry as well.
Well, it's when I ran the production company, we had over 100 interns come through my company. So we had research interns that would work on when we did our story planning, and that would reach out to people and we would work out, well, what do we want in the episodes? If we did 13 episodes, what stories do we want to hit? Then we had production interns, which were on set with me while we're shooting. And then we had post-production interns, which are the editing and the post-production aspect of it. Now, I teach at the university once in a while in the last 10 years after I received my master's. So I usually teach maybe one day a week. And what I find is that the students need real life experience. Like, I haven't had interns for about 4 years now. And as I thought about this, I'm like, I want to bring together a team, not only so that I don't feel as alone around it, right? But also because I want them to really learn. It's very important to me that they learn and that they leave with a really good experience. Just last week, I was at a ceremony where I won the Outstanding Mentor Award at the university that the students had, I don't know, put my name in for. Anyway, the point being is that I'm like, how can I create a win-win? I have a lot of knowledge in business and marketing and media. And so I can take those students, they can help me launch and do research with what I want. and we can get together every 2 weeks on Zoom, and I can teach them what it's going to take to validate. And it's going to be very exciting because we're literally starting a new brand and we're validating the business model in the marketplace. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but all I know is we are going to keep going until we find the niche and the pain point, until we find the solid business model, which is going to work in the marketplace. And they're going to get to see all of that. So I'm really excited about it.
No, and I think that's great. It goes back to my whole expression earlier about marketing fatigue, because I think that a lot of people just assume, because everything they see online, that when I start out, I need to do everything. There are certain types of marketing directions that, funny enough, do work with different size businesses, and you look at an athlete, for instance, and the first thing I say to them is, hey, you are basically getting free publicity from the sport you were playing, right? Like, that's free publicity. That's why your follower count is so high, because you were getting that free exposure and getting paid for it. But
it's not like the media outlets, like when people are
when they were just watching the games.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to when it comes to stuff like that, like social media. And there's also an egotistical side, I in a confident side, I see in people based off of the stage of business and the stage of growth. And I think that you going in and you talking about validation, as I think is a key point here, that I think we could push towards the audience for this call, because I get so many inquiries from people that will say stuff like, I need a sponsor for my business, or I need a logo, or I need this. And though these tangibles you're creating for them are impactful, those tangibles are, it's that intangible of what you said, of where you help teach them how this stuff works, how to go through this stuff, that's going to be more valuable than the actual tangibles itself. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, because we all have great ideas, or we think they're great ideas. So I can have an idea as to what I think is going to happen in the marketplace, right? But you can't be so attached to your idea that you don't test and validate it. Mm-hmm. Do people really want what you have? And maybe you need to structure it differently. Maybe you think this is what people want, but maybe when you actually start speaking to the market or your potential niche, you'll discover, no, they want something else. Their pain points or their problems or their challenges are in this area. So you want to pivot. So rather than just starting off with, I want to do this, you'll be like, okay, I want to do this. Now let's test and validate my idea in the marketplace. And that could be just as easy as saying, hey, I'm going to be doing a free Zoom call on creating a sizzle reel for your brand, right? Come on board, join me on my Zoom call. It's free of charge. And then I will go through like the sizzle reel, why I did what I did in sizzle reel. We can talk about that if you like, or do a demo. And then it's also like, what are your pain points? Like, tell me about what would stop you from creating this. So somebody would say, well, I'm not really that good on air. I don't feel confident on air. And I might not have thought, oh, maybe I do need to do some on-air training, or maybe I need to do something where they have a task to do a minute on air to get them started. Maybe I wouldn't have thought of that. But until I had that conversation with my ideal marketplace, until as I was going through my Zoom call and saying, okay, does everybody understand this part? What do you all think about that? Do you feel comfortable doing that? What about this? Or it could be, I don't know the tech around it. I won't know that till I validate my idea and I get that information. So I feel from a business model point of view, it's absolutely crucial. I think it is one of the mistakes that people make. They become too attached to their idea. They're not willing to check in with their marketplace and make any shifts, adjustments that actually genuinely help their audience. And yeah, so those are my thoughts around that for sure.
Yeah, I think that's where marketing fatigue comes in, right? Because I think, and I've got it plenty when it comes to prospects coming in. They come in and they're like million, even million, 2 million a year. I mean, I would say that about 250 is around the time when you're validating. That's a good place to be for validation. But you still get those larger companies that come in and they're like, hey, we wanna do this, kind of marketing or this kind of marketing, and they have no foundation set up. They didn't even grab any of their, like you said, like, let's grab small during that pivotal phase of who we were and what we were, to start creating a much more systematized structure and niche towards what we're trying to do. And I always have to turn them down because I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, like, you have no foundations here. It's going to take twice to 3 times as much money to help you grow.
Yeah.
Because you don't have anything.
Exact word. I was like, foundation. Mm-hmm. So where people are coming and they want to launch something and you're like, but I don't. What's your brand? What are you speaking to? Who are you speaking to? What's your unique niche in the marketplace? You don't even have that. And interestingly enough, I was speaking to a web designer, and she says she runs into this all the time.
Yep.
She's like, people are coming and saying, make a website. It's like, okay, well, what's the copy that's going to be on that website? If you haven't done your foundational work, that's why I think it's really great what you're doing is you're creating that foundational work. If you don't get that right, you don't get that solidified, then what you do next, it's not going to be lined up for the greatest chance for success. So I agree with you. I think that foundational work is really critically important. So, and with the media brand, often people will come with their brand first, like they need that. So I won't even go into the media brand unless they have their personal brand developed, but it's like taking it to the next level. Okay, so you've got your audience, you've got your personal brand in place. Now let's look at, like I said earlier, your content areas. What are the content areas you can speak about? What are the areas that provide social proof to the journalist, et cetera, to say this person is an expert in their field? They are an authority. Even though your clients still want that, it's different from the media. They want that at a whole other level. Because think about it from the journalist point of view or the TV producers. Like, for example, when I was on a major network and I was the story chaser. So my job was to find the stories. We were doing a 4-hour live show. I needed to quickly get on the phone, find people for the show, and they had to literally show up that day. It's like the quickest timeline you could possibly think of. I had to find out if they were good on air. When I spoke to them on their phone, what was their background? Why? Because I didn't want to be embarrassed. I wanted to make sure that that person that I was bringing on board was credible and would be good on air or would be good, if they were doing a quote or something like that. So think about it from that point of view. The journalist, the producer, etc., they want to know that you are credible because it will bite them in the butt if you're not good on air, or if all of a sudden you don't really have a PhD, it's from some weekend university, or like, you got to just think about it from their perspective. So you want to build that brand. So you're building credibility. You've got your social proof. You've got some on-air work if that's the way you want to go. Yeah, to package yourself. And that is the difference. That's the next level for media brand packaging.
Interesting you say that. Foundations are by far, I think, the biggest thing people miss. And honestly, I think that they get to a point where nothing against your web developer that you talk to or web designer. But I mean, I've gotten to the point in business where, if I see someone that's only making 50 a year and they're still in that personal brand validation stage, I would probably tell them, you don't need all this foundational stuff yet. Like, you're not looking to create these huge systems yet. You're still trying to find out your why. So just kind of starting, like you said, starting off and testing and being able to work with other people and see how certain things work is by far going to move the needle for you faster right now where you're at than where you will be when we actually can take all that stuff, create a great foundation for you. I'd like to share some of the elements, and you can kind of go through them a little bit to kind of give people, what would you like to go through first?
Why don't you bring up, because it's most Joyce's, her media kit. So there are two things that you will need that are assets that you'll need to create. One is a media kit. The other term is EPK. It's an older term, or press kit. So you can put this on a website, like as a page on media, or you can put it in a PDF. And then the second thing you'll need to build is a sizzle reel or a demo reel. So those are the two assets that you will need to create. And again, even if you're just starting off. So if you want to bring it on the screen, I can kind of show the strategy of why I did what I did for her particular media kit. All right. So if you want to bring up Scarlett's sizzle reel. Okay. So for anybody that, again, is starting off, you want to start bringing elements together. Scarlett, she's got a good Instagram following. She's got about 44K. The first thing that I have here is a little bit of proof to say this girl knows what she's talking about, okay? She's a licensed financial advisor. In the finance space, that's important. She does like investments. She's got her followers on there for her social proof, 20 years of experience. She's got an MBA. She's Latina. I want them to just glance this in about 3 seconds and just go, okay, this is worth me pressing play. That's my objective with this billboard right now. It's a quick scan of about 3 seconds for the conversion of, now I want to press play. Okay, now if you actually press play, well, maybe watch about 30 seconds and then I'll go through and I'll let you know what every single portion of why I edited it the way I did. And I don't know if you can hear the sound. You might need to click that on your Zoom. But start from the very beginning, Zach, because every component means something.
She's the founder of Money Mindset Wealth Management.
Combines her financial expertise with personal growth strategies.
I was with JP Morgan for over a decade.
I mean, I grew up a poor girl living in an inner city. You like to call Joyce the badass single mom who gets done. Coming up next is Scarlett Joyce Rojas, the finance guru transforming the money game. As the best-selling author of 31 badass money mindset affirmations, this fierce will exceed into thousands of followers.
Okay, that's good. Let's so just so we don't go too far. Okay, so Zach, if you can go through and just click every few seconds, I will explain my strategy. So I mentioned off the top.
You want me to start back at the beginning, or do you want me to stop?
Yeah, go from the beginning. We'll go like every few seconds, and I'll tell you. Okay, so right off the bat, it was to give a little bit of social proof to say this girl's serious. Let me press play. Okay, now the first thing that came up. Okay, this is what I had to work with. So that right there was the closest I had to a TV, the first one, a TV-based interview, okay? It said what she does and who she is. The next one that I picked talked about the fact that she brings a psychological approach. So it now separated that she's not just finance, but she's finance in money mindset and her niche, okay? The next one after that, if you just go a few seconds in, that one. So that was chosen because it shows her connected to LPL Financial. That's a big name in the finance industry. And she's on stage and it's a nice, clean look. And she also talked about being a single mom. Okay, so now I'm building her narrative as to who she is. Okay, go a few seconds. Okay, now this is her personal story. She's a Latina from the inner cities. Again, it's a nice shot in studio because I don't have a lot of studio shots with her. And she talks about her life. You know how you were talking about using your story, right? So every single thing that I have listed was very strategically placed. Go to the next section, and it's also short, quick, and hooks, right? Now, you might not know who this person is coming up in a moment, but it also shows that she's in a big screen. That's Jack Canfield, and he comes up later in her demo and talks about her. He's the guy that launched the Chicken Soup for the Soul. So if you're familiar with him, you would recognize that she's connected to this big thing that they were doing. But again, if you don't, he comes up later where he literally speaks about her. So that would be another point of social proof, being connected to somebody. That is a shot. It's a power pose, and it shows that she's got all these women. So it's her being on stage. Then the rest of it is just kind of cool shots where I'm actually doing the voiceover because I didn't have enough to build it all together because I can do voiceovers. That was her launch of her best-selling book, and then showing the number one and showing a bit of her personality, a shot of her behind the scenes. This is her following. Anyway, here's my point to all of this. When you're doing your sizzle reel, you can't just like put stuff together. You have to strategically think about every few seconds that you have that you're utilizing to hook, because sometimes you'll get maybe 5 seconds and that's it. So that's the importance of a sizzle reel. And even if you don't have a lot, you can do things like put an image on the screen with the voiceover. Let's say you don't have a video of you on stage, but you have a nice wide shot or a close-up shot. You can literally do a little push with the editing software into the image, so it's got a little bit of movement to it. And so the beginning is all hook, 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 hook. Yeah. I hope that helps. So that's what you need to do when you're creating your sizzle or demo reel.
Well, I think it shows two things. One, it kind of shows, especially for those people that know nothing about media, how much work and intangible strategy, goes into the creation of these to psychologically do what it's meant to do, right? And I think that number two, it shows her story and her journey, and it builds authenticity and authority. And I think that one thing that you kind of brought up earlier was, teaching people how to go on, not just do their media, but understand once you start growing to a certain point, it's actually very hard to be authentic on screen. And you talked a lot about the media people coming in and the things that they like. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that strategy on helping your clients start to become their true authentic self and understand that personal development side towards that. It's very hard to be authentic on podcasts, in videos, and I know that that's really what the media want.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think because I started doing personal development work long time ago, from the time I was an adult, I guess, I was 21 or something like that. Because I have experience on air, it's very easy for me to be who I am, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think that also comes from, and I just wrote a little bit, a quote for an article for a magazine, is that confidence comes from knowing yourself, loving yourself, and not caring about what other people think. There's tremendous power in that, because a lot of times people will go on air and their brain will not be present. It will be, am I going to look silly? Am I going to look like an idiot? Am I going to fumble it? Da, 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 da. There's this whole thing going on. When you get to the point where you relax into yourself, where you relax, where you're like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I just want to be my authentic self. And I want to remember that people are going to love me. They're going to hate me. They're going to whatever, no matter what happens. You're never going to be accepted by everybody, loved by everybody. So when you know that, when you really get that, it's like, F them. I'm just going to focus on being the best person I can be. Like truly the best person, the best caring, loving, authentic person. And after that, I can't be responsible for what people think. Now there is an element of, practicing being on air and being comfortable. That's a skill level. There's no doubt about it. But when you get to a point where you really realize that you cannot control the thoughts of other people, you could only do your best. There's a relaxation that tends to sit in with that. And that's why I like what you said, Zach, earlier about the personal growth and development is important, because you have to get to that point where I really don't care that much about what people are going to say. Like not to say the fact that we all obviously want to be loved and respected on a general sense, but I care what I think. I care that I feel I'm doing the best thing, that I'm a good person. That's what I care about more than anything. So I think doing the work, like you said, the internal work is important, and it will build a more authentic brand, because you will get to the point where you just won't be that concerned.
And it's funny you say that, because I see that there's like this contradictory kind of thing in I think all of us as we evolve as people, because I feel like a lot of us push into, business, owning your own thing, because we do want to be seen. We do want to be heard by other people. And so then it comes to the point where a lot of, and this goes back to the marketing fatigue too, because I feel like people do certain things because of they get a sense of ego more so than a sense of confidence, right? And they end up being like, oh, I want to be seen by the world, but then they care so much about what other people think, it actually stops them from.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Yeah. And the thing is that as general human beings, we all want to be loved and respected on a general scale. But if you require outside validation too often and too much, that's when you're going to get into trouble, because your mask that people talk about will be stronger, because you will always be thinking about that. And this is something I can truly speak about, because it's been my journey. You just got to keep remembering that everybody has their thing that they're dealing with. Okay. Having interviewed many of these gurus, being behind the scenes when the cameras are off, being at lunch with them after they do a big speaking engagement and selling their product, let me tell you, everybody has their thing. And when you have interviewed some of these gurus in that space, you really see that everybody has to deal with their stuff. You can't see the guy that's like, making the 10, 100 million, who doesn't speak to his father for years, or his children hate him, or he's like, can't go to sleep without a bottle of wine every night. When you really sit and know that we're all dealing with our thing, and just focus on being the best version of yourself, and that outside validation will get less and less and less. You will require less and less and less of it. And you know what? Sometimes it comes from childhood, and there might be some demons you have to explore or get rid of, or belief systems. Or, I was very lucky that I was raised with a confident mom in a loving environment, and that set my foundation. And then the rest of it I grew and worked on. But, there might be some personal development work that there's a thing about I'm not good enough or whatever going on in the mind, and you might need to go through that. But I encourage everybody, remember, everybody has the stuff they're dealing with, and just continue to focus on being the best version of you. And that confidence will grow and grow and grow and grow.
And that's the thing about confidence, is that it's there's a stepping stone to confidence.
Yeah.
I saw it myself as you start trying to go to the next level. Like you think everyone strives and says, oh, I want to be a millionaire. That's like the thing, right? Like, I want to have $1 million, but it's like, well, I bet you millionaires strive to make 10 million, and 10 million.
Exactly right.
I want to be a billionaire, and then you see the billionaire. But the funny thing about money is it's really just an energy. It's really just energy of give and take. Everyone sees it valued differently. For me, for instance, I saw this whole premise of when I was going through what we just talked about, that phase, my success shifted itself. It's like, okay, well, yeah, money's important, but it's really not the thing that defines me. It's really my family and my personal time, being able to go out and go to the gym like I want to do, and go for those runs and do all that stuff and be more present. And it was that shift that helped me start to make it to the next level. And so I just thought I'd bring that up because just from a personal being vulnerable perspective for our audience, that it is common. I hear so many people that come to me, if they be partners or they be, vendors, or they be just other people that I know, that will be like, they're like, oh, that person's job isn't that hard. They're just getting the trash, or they're just making the design, or they're just creating that website for us, right? And it's like every single job on this planet, people have their problems, but it's just as hard, just in a different.
Yeah. That's right. Once you
realize that, then I think the world becomes your oyster, because then you see how you can build better relationships, you can be more your authentic self, and you could strive for a success that makes more of an impact than it does a financial gain.
Yeah. And the thing is with around money, again, you made another good point, is it's fine to have a big goal to have financial success, because financial success means freedom. It's not necessarily buying. It's the freedom to say no to this client because you don't want to deal with them, or their values are different, or to do things with your family, or to look after people. So I'm like all about set the biggest money goals you want to set. But be careful that you are not correlating them to your internal sense of self. What I see a lot of people doing is they're setting the money goals because they have to prove something. The bigger. But it's like, why are you doing that? And are you connecting that to your self-esteem? Are you connecting it to your self-esteem? Because now you don't have value, or now you're not successful, whatever. If you have money attached to your self-esteem, that's a problem. Because that means if your money goes up and down, you lose it, whatever, then you're not a good person. You're not this, you're not that. No. Success comes in different categories. Financial success is one category. Just remember that, one category. And like I said, set the biggest money goal you want, but just be really super clear the purpose of that goal, and that you're not asking for validation for more and more money, because it has something to do with your internal sense of self, which is very dangerous to correlate them.
It does. And it's funny you say that, because I'd be the first to tell you that, the more money you make doesn't make you happy. Like I told you, I went through that phase. I'm financially free right now. Money is one of those situations that there's no end.
If that's,
too much money, right? And so it depends on what you like. I don't need fancy things. I don't find fancy things make me happy. My family does. Why do I need more money? And I'm not saying I don't have money, because I do, but I'm at the end of the day, it's like, I'd rather go spend 6 hours a day and work smart than work 12 hours a day, hustle around the clock, and
exactly. And that's where you can separate that having to, because you have to fulfill something that's not quite right internally, because you have to prove something to the world or to whoever, and people sometimes, and listen, it's okay. Sometimes people come from a background where they have to prove something to their father, to whatever. And okay, if you use that, if it's a motivational factor, but that could get you started. But if that's what you're doing everything for in the future, then you're going to be into trouble, right? Because then it's not about your authentic self. It's about you validating something for somebody. So, I've heard stories about people talking about they came from the inner cities, or their father told them they would never make it, and use that power if you need to, but as a trajectory. But if you keep chasing it down the road, that's not gonna, all that money in the world, like you said, is not gonna fix an internal situation that you're still dealing with or working.
Well, here's a good correlation of that. When I first opened my business, I subconsciously was running it out of fear myself of wanting to be seen and heard. And it wasn't until I had kids that I started to be like, oh, my family sees me, my family hears me. And I realized that fear that was driving me up to a certain level was actually part of my plateau, and why
interesting
level. And so I had to have a mindset shift. And, if you want to correlate it with money, does it take you from 100 to 1 million? It could to make that
Yeah.
shift. May not, but maybe at that point, money's you want to build a personal brand and just be a one-person show.
And you don't want the hassle of 10 employees, right? Like there's this trend that's happening about, scaling down actually. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like if you want to build a billion-dollar, multi-million-dollar business, go for it. Like it might be because you like the game of it, Like I think Gary Vee's an excellent example of that. He loves the game of it. Like he truly loves the game, and it's not associated with his self-esteem. He's a perfect example, but that doesn't mean everybody wants to do it that way, right? So I think really looking at why you're doing what you're doing is really important. And if you want to go big, go for it. But if you want to also go small and have a simpler life and not have to deal with the headaches, and you have other things that are important to you, that's why I say financial success is only one part of it. And it kind of bugs me actually when people say, oh, he's so successful. I'm like, yeah, is he really? Is she really? Are they really? Like, okay, they got lots of money. That's not my definition of success.
I had a prospect. I'm starting this gym out here in Arizona that we're starting to work with. And one of the things that I was talking about with the owner on our call is he's like, well, there's this gym down the street. Oh, we want to copy them because they're doing it right and they're successful and they're doing this and they're doing that and they're successful, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there and I'm telling him like, but are they? I'm like, you don't know what they're
Yeah. Well, maybe they're losing money every month.
Maybe there was money left and right and the guy's not happy and he's getting a divorce and he, doesn't have time for his family. Like, you don't know. That will lead to our next kind of showing here to finish off for the podcast. But I want to share your last, which is funny enough, a personal brand. And I think it relates the direction he went with his career and his personal brand. And this is something, what would you call this that I'm about to bring up on a screen here?
Which one are you bringing up?
Bringing up the
Tyler. Okay. Tyler is actually an Instagram influencer right now. He wasn't as big at the time we did this. Otherwise, I would have put the numbers right on the front there. One of the things that he wanted to promote is he's a gorgeous guy. Like there's no doubt about it. He got the genetic lottery, right? What happened with him was that he didn't have the easiest childhood, and he went through a lot, and he started to feel like he was just being seen for his physical appearance, and he's much more than that. So he's a real mental health advocate he's done a lot of personal development work, etc. in his space. And at the time we did this, we were specifically speaking to, he wanted to get more print work in that space, right? And so if you notice, if you scale down, I made sure that we had his corporate identity there. So if there were brand sponsors and things like that, and connecting to the brands he already had that show proof he's already done this. People have already trusted him with their brand. And then and all the logos, if you go down, the magazine exercise spreads, which is one of the things he wanted to do at the time, again, that showed proof. He's already done it. These are many examples. People have trusted him. Journalists have trusted him to be in their magazines. And then the last one was the covers, because the covers was an important area. And then we mentioned a few of his media and TV appearances. Now, if he had wanted to do specifically TV and media, I would have switched this around. I would have put more emphasis on the TV and media and less on the visuals. But at that particular time, the strategy was around the magazines and the visuals and the print work that he was doing. So every time it should be catered to, again, what is the person's goal? What do they ultimately want to do? What journalists and media do they want to speak to? And how can they be positioned? So
interesting here. A media sheet. I have a media sheet too. I mean, I have everything that you've talked about. I've created my folder. I have stuff that I put in there. I change, I pivot and stuff like that. What made you decide with him, or you and him together on your collaboration of the strategy, to go for the magazines more so than the TV outlets?
Well, that was actually his choice at the time. So it was based on what he said he wanted to do. And I'm like, all right, let's put together something that's very strongly visually appealing. Now, today, if he wanted, let's say, for example, he wanted to do more on-air hosting, something along that line, right? So I would have looked at some of the video assets he had at the time, and I don't think he had a lot. He has more now because his social media following is larger, and he's going in a different direction. But it just depends. I would look at, what do you want to do? Who do you want to speak to? How could we position you in a way that journalists will pick this up? What's the content strategy? What assets do I need from you? Now, let's say he didn't have a lot of visual assets, which some clients don't. Like, you deal with a lot of athletes that might have been on Interviewed after a game, things like that. So you want to collect all those things because that's them on air. But if they don't have a lot of those, then they have to create them. So what does that look like? That looks like, okay, I'll interview the person on a podcast. I'm a TV person. I can do that. Let's get you on air. Let's get your message in visual format. In this particular case, it just wasn't the foundation for what he was doing at the time. So what's really critically important is, again, looking at what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? So if you want to be an on-air announcer, like if you have an athlete and that's their 5-year goal, man, you got to start strategizing now. How are we going to get those visual video assets for you? And even if we don't have them, how can we create them? So yeah, and then you start building that together.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you said there that was quite interesting is like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do with 5 years? Because it's very easy for all of us, as you said earlier, to come up with this idea and to go out there and be like, oh, I think I want to do this. But if you don't really come down and really think about it and really set up a good vision for yourself, you could get halfway down the road and it's unvalidated, or you realize I don't want to do this anymore. A good example would be if you wanted to become a public speaker, right? And you were traveling, but then you had kids, you might get to a point where you're like, oh, now I'm traveling too much. So you have to think about that kind of stuff earlier on as you start picking your mediums for outlets.
Point. Yeah. And also, like, when I'm talking about validating your offer, I would separate that from, let's say, your kind of vision life goal, in the sense that if you're launching a business, like a specific business with a client, a pain point, a solution, a transformation you're creating, that's what I mean by validating your offer. If you want, for example, to be an on-air personality as an athlete, right, a commentator, etc., you could have that vision. What you're validating is slightly different. You're more valid. You can still hold that vision and go for it. But now you want to look at, what is your skill set? So you're validating more like, where are you? You know, maybe you're not that great on camera. You know, people start everywhere, you know, and then you also want to look at, why do you want to do that, right? Like, why do you want to do that? And is it because, again, you're feeling a need, you need to be validated? Like, why do you want to do that? So that, like you said, you're not halfway down the path and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't actually really like this. You know, so you are more looking at, okay, this is your dream, your goal. Where are you? What skill levels that you need to access or improve upon, or courses you need to take to get to that eventual spot you want to get to, and carefully look at the reasons why you want to do what you want to do. Like, for example, maybe, you know, the very first time after a game, you got an interview and you really enjoyed it. You found it fun and exciting. And it's like, okay, good. That's a great reason why, versus I want people to love me because I don't feel love.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it comes back to, funny enough, your content too. I see so many people coming out and just splurring all this different types of content out into the world, thinking that something will stick, when it's like, hey, just sit down and it's okay, like you did for yourself. Like, I really like to talk about this stuff. How does that give me energy? How does that help me? And how can I relay it to the direction and the vision / position that I want to put myself in the future? So overall, I think we could probably talk for another 2 hours if we wanted, but let's try to cut it off here. Again, I want to thank you for being on the Brand Power Analysis. Why don't you tell everyone again who you are, where they can find you, and maybe some ways they can contact you?
Sure. Because I'm still building this community and figuring out how it's going to look, I think the best thing is to follow me on Instagram. It's under my name, Aida Memisevic. And what I'm going to end up doing is pinning a link that will be a tie into the community once I figure out what it's going to look like. But basically, it's for anybody that has a vision that they want to be in the media. They want their life, their purpose. That's actually the only people I want to work with, by the way. I've kind of decided that. I want my market to be health and wellness visionaries that really want to do something good in the world, and that want to build a big brand and don't quite know how to do it, you know, how to get to that media brand for the next level. So yeah, follow me on Instagram, and you'll see stuff as it comes up as I create this content. It's exciting.
All right. Well, again, thank you for jumping on, and let's try to have you back on in like 6 months. I'd love to see where this all develops in like 6 months.
Yeah, it'd be exciting. Thanks, Zach. Really appreciate it. And keep doing the great work you're doing with helping people build their true, authentic brand.
Thank you.